The creation here was the Central Selling Organization, or CSO, an arm of De Beers arguably more important than the mining group itself. The CSO was not some invisible cartel, it was a highly methodical operating system for diamonds. It covered all diamonds that came from De Beers mines, as well as third-party producers, funneling them to a centralized warehouse. This avoided any diamonds being sold at the mine and forced them into a centralized inventory pool. The producers gave up pricing control over market timing and pricing in the process. It's kind of like forcing every SaaS vendor to route bookings through one centrally run deal desk. And from there, diamonds were sorted into thousands of categories based on size, shape, color, clarity, and quality. This eliminated one-off bargaining and standardized pricing inputs, and it destroyed any buying arbitrage to cherry-pick diamonds. Now here's where it gets next level. It's called the site system. These were invite-only auctions held a max of 10 times per year, where 100 to 150 site holders were approved for the right to buy. That's right, you had to get approved for the right to give them your money.
Kind of feels like the equivalent of trying to get an invite to the annual Allen & Company Sun Valley Conference, or, I don't know, trying to purchase real estate in Aspen.
Each buyer was shown a sealed box of diamonds. The box composition, which they couldn't see, was predetermined. And guess what? The pricing was fixed, and there was zero negotiation. Take it or leave it. And if you didn't accept the box, you lost access to future auctions. So what did the CSO do with all the other diamonds? They stockpiled them, sometimes multiple years' worth of global demand. And it worked because, unlike crops, diamonds do not degrade and are not all that big to store. They're the perfect commodity to keep hidden away in a vault somewhere below the surface.
How the hell did they pull all this off? I mean, how did they get buy-in? How did their economic interests trump all the others?
Well, because remember, De Beers was backed by big capital. They took advantage of the fact that most producers needed short-term cash. They couldn't house the inventory themselves, and they couldn't survive multi-year downturns. De Beers had that London money and could sit on inventory indefinitely. And if you were brave enough to sell around them, they would temporarily flood your local market, undercut you, and then retighten supply once you died off.
Sounds kind of like Walmart destroying the general store in small towns.
I'm going out of business.
Why, Mr. Farkle?
I can't compete with Walmart's low prices.
Carmen, stop it!
By mid-20th century, 80% to 90% of global rough diamonds flowed through the CSO. Now, it's important to point out there's actually way more diamonds in the world than gold. In fact, scientists estimate that a quadrillion tons of diamonds exist deep below the Earth's surface in cratonic roots.
I didn't even know you could have a quadrillion of something.
And I didn't know what a cratonic root was until today. Total inaccessible gold reserves deep in the earth, estimated at a much lower 400,000 tons. Now, not all that is extractable, given it's too far below the Earth's surface, but if we were to come up with an estimate in terms of how much we could get our hands on, the ratio of diamonds to gold would be a stunning 180 to 1.
Okay, so why do people still want diamonds so much if they're so common?
This is where the spin comes in. In 1938, De Beers hired marketing firm N.W. Ayer to solve a demand problem that arose post the Great Depression. At that time, engagement rings were not culturally mandatory. Ayer employed famed Sultan of Spin Edward Bernays, whose influence permeated throughout the firm. He's famous for the Torches of Freedom campaign, which encouraged women to rip cigarettes. He also made ivory soap a household need, and he increased bacon sales via the breakfast table. Name a better marketer. I'll wait.
Someone pass the Heinz. We got a real-life Don Draper on our hands.
Many say that Mad Men was actually based on Edward Bernays. While Bernays didn't directly work on the De Beers account, the firm applied the same frameworks to diamonds, which encouraged selling to an identity and playing into social expectations rather than just trying to sell a product. Internal documents from the PR firm at the time cite the goal of strengthening the tradition of the engagement ring and making diamonds a psychological necessity. This took the form of women pressuring their men to buy them a diamond ring.
That diamond is symbolic of a pledge that will be made this year by nearly 1.5 million couples.
To do that, they leaned heavily into Hollywood movies, placing large rings on fingers of the era's most famous actresses at the time. And they used celebrities to normalize the buying behavior in flashy newspaper ads. Then in 1947 came the famed campaign, "A Diamond is Forever." It was brilliant because it implied no resale, no secondary market, and no pricing comparisons. And went so far as to tell men that they should spend 3x their monthly paycheck on one.
Sheesh, how much was rent back then? Like $2 a month?
Before the campaign, diamonds were optional with varying sizes and undefined spending bands. Afterwards, they were expected and anchored to a specific pricing mechanism. They successfully engineered demand. And to tie this back to the CSO, supply was already controlled. Prices were already set. Together, they formed a closed economic loop. This model reigned supreme for more than 75 years.
All right, so diamonds started in India. They had a stopover in Africa. There were some logistic shenanigans, and then movie stars started popularizing them in more recent history. So where's the next frontier?
Well, we've come full circle as India has become one of the largest producers of lab-grown diamonds. Lab-grown diamonds were first created in 1954 for industrial use because they're extremely strong and can cut through stuff, I guess. They're used in industrial cutting, grinding, and drilling tools, as well as semiconductor manufacturing, laser technology, and specialized medical equipment. But they only became a real threat to the jewelry market after tech advances in the 2010s made large, high-quality stones cheaper and more scalable. 15 years later, lab-grown diamonds now account for 20% of total diamond purchases in the US and 50% of engagement ring purchases worldwide. You can get a lab-grown diamond for as low as 25% of an earth-grown one. To put that into perspective, someone who has $25,000 to spend now has the purchasing power of a $100,000 diamond for their partner. That's a massive jump.
Yeah, let's forget Bitcoin. Invest in lab diamonds, people.
In a half-hearted attempt to stay relevant, industry analysts report that mined diamonds since 2022 have dropped in price by 34%, which is a steep fall, yet still multiples off the price of a lab-grown diamond. The math still isn't mathing when you're buying an engagement ring. For context, natural diamonds often sold at 6 to 8x their mine gate value once they reach retail, driven less by manufacturing costs, which only account for 2 price multiple turns, and more by controlled supply and price opacity. As a result, De Beers is bleeding. In early 2025, De Beers disclosed a $2.9 billion impairment. That means a write-off on the value of the diamond business. This was the second major write-down in consecutive years, following a $1.6 billion impairment charge in 2024. The company reported an operating loss of $3.1 billion in 2024, going into the red after clinging to an operating profit of just $283 million in 2023. So to cut to the chase, the company now has an enterprise value of around $4 billion, which has fallen dramatically from around $13 billion in 2011 when 40% of the firm was purchased. This represents a 60 to 70% decline in valuation since the peak, or since when lab-grown diamonds showed up. I've seen a lot of FP&A tools, and Aleph is one of the few that gave me that aha moment within minutes. I remember watching their founder, shout out to Albert, connect my NetSuite data and build me a full P&L live in minutes. Aleph is now trusted by hundreds of leading companies. I've had the CFOs from Turo, 8Sleep, Zapier, and more on the pod, and every one of them is a huge advocate. I also just published my second annual CFO Tech Stack report, and Aleph has been on the podium both years, including a #1 finish in the $50 to $100 million segment this year. Instead of being just another planning tool, they built a real enterprise-grade data foundation for finance, implemented at startup speed with AI-native workflows woven into its DNA. All your systems, ERP, CRM, HRIS, ATS, product usage, and more, powering one clean, governed data layer that finance can actually trust. And with AI moving as fast as it is, they're pushing even further. MCP, custom AI chatbots, AI-powered variance analysis, and the list keeps growing. Try it with your own data at getaleph.com/run. That is GETALEPH.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you.